My beloved child. Last night, a conversation unfolded that you never witnessed, and perhaps it was never meant for your ears. Two hearts stood on opposite sides of a truth that had remained hidden for far too long. One voice trembled as it spoke your name. The other fell completely silent. Not because of fear, but because what was revealed challenged everything they thought they understood about you. If you could have seen that moment, you would have realized that some truths arrive quietly, yet they change the direction of a heart forever. There are parts of your story that no crowd has applauded and no stranger has celebrated. The quiet sacrifices, the prayers whispered when no one answered, the kindness you offered without expecting anything in return, those moments often disappear from human memory. But love notices what the world overlooks. Sometimes the deepest parts of who you are remain invisible until the right moment arrives, and then, almost unexpectedly, someone finally sees beyond the surface. The words spoken last night were not dramatic. They were gentle, almost hesitant. They described a person who kept choosing hope even after disappointment. Someone who continued showing compassion after being misunderstood. Someone who carried unseen burdens without allowing bitterness to become their identity. As each sentence unfolded, your soulmate's heart began to wrestle with an unfamiliar question. Have I only known the shadow of this person, while the light remained hidden from me? That question lingered long after the conversation ended. Many people are quick to judge what they can easily see. They notice the smile but never the tears that came before it. They admire the strength without realizing how many lonely nights it took to build it. Yet the truth has a remarkable way of arriving exactly when it is needed. Not to shame anyone, but to replace misunderstanding with compassion. Perhaps you've wondered why certain connections have felt incomplete. Why words have sometimes failed where your heart longed to be understood. There are seasons when silence seems louder than affection. During those moments, it is easy to believe that no one truly sees you. But hidden beneath those unanswered questions, something has been quietly taking shape, something that cannot be rushed. Imagine standing before a window covered in morning fog. At first, everything beyond the glass appears blurred. You might assume there is nothing beautiful waiting outside. Then, little by little, the fog begins to fade. The landscape never changed, only your ability to see it clearly did. Hearts often experience the same awakening. Understanding doesn't always arrive all at once. Sometimes it comes one small revelation at a time. The truth spoken about you was not a list of accomplishments. It wasn't about success, appearance, or anything that fades with time. It was about your character. About the quiet choices that formed who you became when no one was watching. Those are the treasures that cannot be borrowed or imitated. They become visible only to someone willing to look deeper than first impressions. And yet, there was one detail that had not been shared before. When your soulmate heard it, they stopped asking whether you were worthy of love. Instead, they began asking themselves whether they had misunderstood your silence all along. Suddenly, moments that once seemed confusing started fitting together like pieces of a forgotten puzzle. Conversations they had dismissed returned to their memory with completely different meaning. Isn't it remarkable how one honest sentence can reshape years of assumptions? Sometimes people believe they know someone's heart because they have witnessed only a chapter. They forget that every life contains pages written in private, chapters filled with quiet endurance that never become public stories. Those hidden pages often explain everything that seemed impossible to understand. As the night grew quieter, your soulmate found themselves reflecting on moments they had nearly forgotten. A simple act of kindness. A patient response during misunderstanding. A gentle word offered when it would have been easier to walk away. None of those memories seemed significant before. Now they carried unexpected weight. The truth was beginning to connect dots they had never imagined belonged together. But understanding often comes with another emotion. Regret. Not the kind that destroys hope, but the kind that opens the heart to humility. There are times when realizing someone's true value makes us wish we had listened more carefully, noticed more deeply, appreciated more fully. That realization is painful, yet it can also become the beginning of something beautifully different. Even now, there are pieces of this story that remain unseen. Not because they are meant to stay hidden forever, but because every meaningful revelation has its own season. If everything were uncovered at once, its beauty would be too easy to overlook. Some truths need space to settle into the heart before the next one appears. So tonight, carry this quiet reminder with you. Your worth has never depended on how quickly someone recognized it. A diamond does not become precious the moment someone discovers it. Its value existed long before anyone held it in their hands. In the same way, your kindness, your resilience, and your capacity to love have always mattered, even during seasons when they seemed unnoticed. But the conversation from last night did more than reveal who you truly are. It uncovered a secret from your past that even your soulmate had never imagined, a single forgotten moment that explains everything they are beginning to feel now. And that is where this story is only beginning. The forgotten moment was not grand enough to make headlines, yet it carried the quiet weight of a lifetime. Years ago, you stood at a crossroads where no one could fully understand the choice before you. You could have protected your pride, spoken words that could never be taken back, or walked away with your heart closed forever. Instead, you chose something far more difficult. You chose grace when resentment would have been easier. Almost no one noticed. And eventually, even you stopped thinking about it. But last night, that hidden chapter found its way into the conversation. The person speaking did not describe you as perfect. They didn't pretend you had never struggled or questioned your path. They simply shared a truth that had been impossible to ignore. They said, "What makes this person different isn't that life has been easy, it's that hardship never became their identity." Those words settled into your soulmate's heart like rain falling on dry ground. For a long while, they remained silent. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they suddenly had too much to think about. How many times had they mistaken your quietness for distance? How often had they assumed your patience meant you didn't care deeply? And how many moments had slipped away simply because they had been looking at your actions without understanding the story behind them? Questions filled the room where certainty had once lived. Sometimes the greatest transformation begins when certainty disappears. The conversation continued, but it became softer, slower, almost as if every sentence deserved extra care. The person revealing your story spoke about the nights you kept moving forward even when your own confidence felt fragile. They spoke about the encouragement you gave others while quietly carrying burdens of your own. They spoke about the hope you protected, even when disappointment knocked at your door more than once. Your soulmate had never heard those details before. Not because they were hidden out of shame, but because humility rarely announces itself. The strongest hearts often tell the shortest stories about themselves. As the night deepened, an unexpected realization appeared. Perhaps the reason your journey had seemed so difficult wasn't because you were forgotten. Perhaps it was because the deepest qualities of your heart could only be recognized by someone willing to see beyond appearances. That realization changed the atmosphere completely. Instead of wondering whether your story mattered, your soulmate began wondering how many beautiful details had gone unnoticed simply because they had arrived quietly. Life has a remarkable way of disguising its greatest treasures. A seed disappears beneath the soil before anyone celebrates the tree. The sunrise begins while most people are still asleep. And some of the most meaningful connections begin long before either heart realizes what is happening. There is wisdom in that. Not every answer arrives when we demand it. Some answers appear only after we have become ready to receive them. Your soulmate was beginning to understand this, one memory at a time. Then another detail surfaced. The person sharing your story smiled gently before saying, "There was one moment I'll never forget." The room grew still again. They described a day when you encouraged someone who believed they had nothing left to offer. You probably considered it an ordinary conversation. You may have forgotten it by the next morning. The other person never did. Because those simple words became the reason they refused to give up. When your soulmate heard that, something shifted inside them. They realized your greatest influence had never come from impressive speeches or dramatic moments. It had always come from the quiet way you made people feel seen. That kind of kindness cannot be manufactured. It flows naturally from a heart that has learned compassion through experience. And suddenly, they wondered whether they had been searching for extraordinary signs while overlooking the ordinary miracles already surrounding your life. That thought lingered long after every other sentence had faded. Before the conversation ended, one final statement was shared. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. Yet it echoed more deeply than everything else. If you ever have the privilege of walking beside this person, they said softly, don't measure them by what they say about themselves. Measure them by the peace they leave in the lives they touch. No one spoke for several moments after that. Some silence carries emptiness. This silence carried understanding. But just as your soulmate believed they had finally heard the entire story, the person across from them quietly reached into an old envelope. Inside was something connected to you. Something preserved for years without your knowledge. The moment your soulmate saw it, every assumption they still held was about to change once again. What was hidden inside that envelope would reveal a side of your journey that no one had ever spoken about aloud, and its meaning would become impossible to ignore. The envelope rested quietly between them. It wasn't decorated. It wasn't marked with anything extraordinary. To anyone passing by, it would have looked like an ordinary piece of paper that had simply survived the years. Yet sometimes the simplest things carry the deepest stories. With careful hands, it was opened. Inside was a small handwritten note. The ink had faded in places, and the edges had softened with time, but the message remained clear. It spoke of a moment when you had offered encouragement to someone standing at the edge of giving up. You never expected to see that note again. In fact, you may have forgotten writing those words altogether. But the person who received them never forgot. They reminded me that tomorrow was still worth believing in. As those words were read aloud, your soulmate lowered their eyes. Not because they were overwhelmed by guilt, but because they were beginning to understand something that had never crossed their mind before. The greatest parts of your life were never the moments everyone applauded. They were the moments no audience ever witnessed. There is a quiet kind of goodness that asks for nothing in return. It doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't count how many people noticed. It simply continues to give because that is its nature. That was the truth they were finally beginning to see. One memory after another rose to the surface. They remembered conversations that once seemed ordinary but now felt meaningful. They remembered the calmness in your voice during difficult moments. They remembered how you celebrated the victories of others without demanding attention for your own journey. Piece by piece, a completely different picture was forming. It was as though someone had taken scattered stars and suddenly connected them into a constellation that had always been there. The person sharing your story spoke again. They've experienced disappointment, they said softly. They've known uncertainty. They've carried questions that remained unanswered longer than they hoped. But somehow, they never allowed hardship to convince them that kindness was weakness. Those words settled deeply. Strength is often misunderstood. Many people think strength is found in raising your voice. Sometimes it is found in choosing peace. Many believe courage appears only during dramatic moments. Sometimes courage is simply deciding to love again after life has given you every reason to close your heart. Your soulmate was beginning to recognize that difference. And with every realization came another question. How many times did I misunderstand what was right in front of me? That question had no immediate answer. Some questions aren't meant to be solved in a single night. They're meant to reshape the heart little by little. Outside, the night grew quieter. Inside, something entirely different was happening. Old assumptions were falling away. New understanding was taking their place. Then, almost unexpectedly, the conversation turned toward the future. Not as a prediction. Not as a promise. But as a gentle reflection. The person smiled and said, "Some people enter our lives to impress us. Others enter to transform us. The difference isn't always obvious in the beginning." Your soulmate remained silent once more. Because deep inside, they were beginning to wonder whether your presence had already been changing them in ways they had never noticed. That realization brought both gratitude and humility. There are moments when the heart stops asking, "What can I receive?" Instead, it quietly begins asking, "How can I become someone worthy of the love I've been shown?" Perhaps that was the most important change of all. Yet the evening held one final surprise. As the conversation drew to a close, the person carefully folded the old note and returned it to the envelope. Then they paused. "There is one thing," they whispered, "that I chose not to tell you until now." Your soulmate looked up. "What is it?" A gentle smile appeared. "They still don't realize how many lives they've quietly touched." The room fell completely still. Because at that very moment, your soulmate understood that the story wasn't really about a single note, or a single conversation. It was about a life that had been creating ripples far beyond what anyone could see. But even then, one mystery remained untouched. There was another message. It had never been opened. No one in that room knew who had written it, or why your name was on the front. And as your soulmate reached toward that sealed message, they realized the next truth waiting inside might be the most unexpected of them all. The unopened message rested in your soulmate's hands. For a long moment, neither person reached for it. Some words deserve silence before they are spoken. Some truths ask the heart to become still before they can truly be understood. Finally, the seal was gently opened. Inside was only a single page. No long explanation. No dramatic confession. Just a few simple lines written with remarkable sincerity. They may never realize how much their quiet faith, steady kindness, and gentle spirit have meant to the people around them. But I hope one day they understand that the world is brighter because they chose compassion instead of bitterness. The room became completely silent. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because those words carried a truth that could not be improved by adding more. Your soulmate read the message again. Then a third time. Each reading revealed something different. For so long, they had measured people by the moments that demanded attention. Now they were discovering that the strongest character is often revealed in moments no one applauds. It wasn't perfection that made your story beautiful. It was perseverance. It wasn't a life without disappointment. It was a heart that refused to let disappointment have the final word. That realization changed everything. The questions that had filled the night slowly gave way to gratitude. The uncertainty became understanding. The distance became compassion. And the image your soulmate carried of you was no longer built on assumptions. It was built on truth. Yet the greatest discovery was not really about how someone else saw you. It was about how easily people forget to see the quiet value within themselves. Perhaps you've spent too much time believing your smallest acts of kindness didn't matter. Perhaps you've wondered whether your patience, forgiveness, or encouragement made any real difference. This story offers another possibility. That even the words you barely remember speaking may have become hope for someone else. That even the kindness you considered ordinary may have stayed in another person's heart for years. You may never know every life you've quietly touched. And that's okay. The most meaningful seeds are often planted by hands that never live to see every flower bloom. Continue choosing kindness. Continue speaking words that heal. Continue becoming the kind of person whose character remains the same whether anyone is watching or not. Because the deepest legacy is rarely built through extraordinary moments. It is built through ordinary moments repeated with extraordinary love. As dawn approached, your soulmate carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Not to hide it, but to preserve the reminder of what they had learned. When they finally stepped outside, the first light of morning was breaking across the horizon. Everything looked familiar. Yet nothing felt the same. The world had not changed overnight. A heart had. And sometimes, that is where every meaningful journey begins. So if this story has found its way to you today, let it leave you with one lasting reminder. Never underestimate the quiet good you bring into the lives of others. You may never hear every thank you. You may never know every heart you've encouraged. You may never witness every ripple created by your compassion. But goodness has a way of traveling farther than our eyes can see. Walk forward with hope. Choose grace over resentment. Choose patience over anger. Choose love over fear. Not because the path is always easy, but because every act of genuine kindness becomes part of a story far greater than the moment in which it was given. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this. The greatest chapters of your life are not written by the opinions others hold about you,